The refugee crisis. Who is a refugee? The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees defines a refugee as a person who has been forced to flee his country due to natural disasters, war, or persecution. Why are the Syrians fleeing? The first reason is the violence. Since the Syrian civil war has begun, more than 240,000 people have been killed, including 12,000 children. 1 million more have been wounded or permanently disabled. The war has become more deadly since foreign powers joined the conflict. The second reason is the collapsed infrastructure. In Syria, healthcare and education systems and other infrastructures have been destroyed. The economy is shattered. An estimated 4.8 million people are in areas of Syria that are difficult to access because of the conflict. It is hard to help or aid these groups. The last reason is the children's safety. Syrian children have lost loved ones, suffered injuries, missed years of schooling, and witnessed violence and brutality. Warring parties forcibly recruit children to serve as fighters, human shields, and support roles, according to the US Department. A short history overview. Since 1966, Syria has been led by the Assad family. After the death of Hafiz al-Assad, his son Bashir al-Assad became the leader of Syria. At first, Bashir al-Assad promised to lead the country in a different way as his father did. A few years later, Bashir al-Assad signalized that democratic rules were not his real plans and started isolating the Syrian economy. Actually, the roots of this conflict started after World War I. The French and British established borders of the Middle Eastern countries. In that case, the problem is that many religions and ethnic groups live in the same territory. The Assad family belongs to a small religious group called Alawites, which make only 12% of the Syrian population. The majority in Syria are the Sunnis, which make 74% of the population. The Arab Spring failed in Syria. After the success of demonstrations in Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, the so-called Arab Spring spread out to Syria. Assad refused to step down, although 12 years of repression passed. People there started demonstrating, and Assad combated the demonstrators with the Syrian army. As a result, rebels against the Assad regime started fighting back and a civil war developed. Assad and his followers were supported by Russia, while the rebels were supported by the USA and Europe. It seems like a proxy war. The Islamic State. The Islamic extremists used this opportunity and founded the terror group Islamic State to build a totalitarian regime in this chaos. This organization is one of the most violent and successful organizations of the world. In a few months, they took many areas of the Middle East by killing people who don't want to follow their ideology. And what is about the Syrian population? The Syrian population is kept between the regime, rebels, and religious extremists. 1/3 of the population has been displaced. Over 4 million Syrians has fled from Syria. The majority is in camps of neighbor countries. Saudi Arabia and other rich states in this area has not welcomed any refugees. The UN were not prepared for such a refugee crisis on this scale. As a result, many refugee camps are crowded. Refugees have to face cold, hunger, and disease. Syrians hoped that the situation would change in Europe and decided therefore to seek asylum. Nevertheless, border states like Greece are under enormous pressure, especially those countries who do not have the financial resources to keep them.
Now let's focus on the refugee crisis on a global scale. There have been many countries who have denied refugees any kind of access to their countries, such as Denmark and Hungary, and also the Netherlands, who do not want any refugees at all. Then we also have some other countries, for example, Slovakia, who only accepts refugees of Christian belief, but as Muslims are the majority of refugees, about 95%, that has been put into perspective. At last, we also have Poland, who has strongly denied that they want any kind of refugees and said that refugees are compared to as human garbage and freeloaders. The majority of refugees have found their place in Lebanon, in Jordan, and also in Turkey. Lebanon has taken in 1.2 million refugees, Jordan around 600,000, and Turkey around 1 million. According to Amnesty International, 95% of all refugees, um, especially coming from Syria, have found their place in all three countries. Now let's talk about the refugee situation in Germany. So, after an initial euphoria, um, Germany has faced many problems, such as the daily clashes in the refugee centers, and not only the overcrowding of the shelters, but also the local authorities and the police have been stretched to their limit. And there have been many attacks of Muslims as well as Christians, and the right wing conservatives um, have not helped the refugee crisis at all, and it raises many questions over the future.
The hurdle race of a refugee in Germany. In Germany, there are special regulations for refugees. There is no chance if someone is not politically persecuted. The refugees are distributed on the 16 federal states in Germany and have to stay 3 months in an initial reception. The shelters are differently organized. Refugees get only €40 pocket money, and there is a residence obligation, which means they can't leave this area. Refugees have also to go to school and learn the German language. After passing this hurdle race, they may be allowed to work. Nevertheless, the stay in Germany is still limited and finished when a refugee does not fulfill the conditions.
Now let's talk about the pros of refugees. Well, it boosts the population growth, definitely, and it does feed the shortage of workers we have in many European countries. It also helps with the demographic uh, problem that many countries such as Germany faces, which can definitely be solved by the massive influx of refugees. Furthermore, the pension gap can be filled as many young professionals coming from Syria are becoming new taxpayers and acquiring a higher education, and that can definitely speed up the economy. And at last, the refugees and the massive influx of refugees coming into different European countries and around the globe helps with cultural diversity and helps the country not only succeed with economic growth but also cultural growth, and it also helps the country with learning new ways and the new language.
On the other hand, there are the cons. Actually, Germany did not think much about the pros and cons. They seem to be driven by emotions more than by reason. Although Germany has an incredible low birth rate, refugees put strain on the infrastructure. In larger cities, there will be less room on public transportation and less availability of housing. Taking 1 million refugees is like taking 1 million unemployed, who are mostly not educated and their skills do not fit into the European labor market. Furthermore, this number of refugees can put strain on the healthcare system, education and benefit system, and in the government in general. Now let's talk about possible solutions. The first possible solution is the close of further immigration to Europe. Secondly, there have to be stricter requirements for people wishing to immigrate to the EU. Besides, EU member states have to contribute money to those countries which receive the highest number of immigrants and asylum seekers. This money will be used towards helping countries to integrate their foreigners into their societies.
Following are two more possible solutions um, in solving the refugee crisis. It's definitely to focus on the successful integration processes, which just means that the refugees who are coming into the country, especially into European countries, for example, it definitely helps to not only let them adapt our ways, but also to fully integrate them into society. And that helps with, and that can be speeded up definitely with language classes and getting into their normal life as acquiring not only education via going to school, but also getting a job and just mixing with the general population and therefore slowly integrating very organically. And another possible solution could be to focus on the prevention of persecution in third world countries, um, which means that the problem at its root must be solved, and third world countries must be helped in advance.